So let me introduce myself. So I'm Ravin, and I work for Adobe as an Android engineer. And before that, I've worked in Yahoo for 4.5 years as a lead Android engineer as well. So the topics we are going to cover today is Android manifest, the Android components, the activities, the intents, threads, which is revision for people who have done computer science, and then services is another component we'll learn today. So the prerequisites for this topic is you have to have the Android Studio, then you have to have the starter code base, so you can go to this GitHub URL and then download the app from there. There are two branches. One is main and one is final. So if you take the final, you can directly run and go through the whole app without changing the code. And you'll have to uncomment and comment stuff. So these are the shortcuts available for Android Studio for Mac and Windows. So what we'll do today is we'll learn all the concepts using app called Contact App. So we'll build that app while we are learning the concepts. So the first screen will be something like a Contact App with two buttons, and then when you go to Contact App, you can actually add a contact, and then you will be able to add their phone number, address, and then we'll also learn something about services, which we'll understand later in this presentation. So let's see what's Android Studio or Android Manifest. So Android Manifest is nothing but a configuration file. It is a file which uses XML as its language. So everything is tags and then properties inside them. And this is used for defining the structure of the app and then also defining some metadata of the app. Uh, Also, we define all the components, which we'll learn in the next slide in this manifest file as well. Also, if you are giving some permission like, okay, the app can use internet, or app can go and use your camera, or app can use your folders inside your file manager, then all these permissions also go inside this Android manifest file. So this is a sample manifest file, and we'll see line by line what each line means. So the first line is nothing but it is telling that this file is an XML file, and then we'll be using tags and properties in it. So the second line is a tag called manifest, and this tag includes all the configuration. So all other tags goes inside this tag. And then there is a on the third line there is something called package, and then we give a unique name here, like something like com.metrohacks or something, some name which is unique. When you want to upload your app to Play Store, you have to have a unique name so that the Android or the Google guys can understand, oh, this is an app which is different from all the other apps. So you have to provide a unique name here. Then there's something on this line which says uses permission. So this is nothing but we tell, okay, this app uses foreground service permission. We'll learn about this in later slides. Then there is a tag called application. So this tag consists of all the components which will go inside the app. So components are nothing but the basic elements of an Android app. So the screens, or something which you are doing in background, or notification using broadcast receivers or something like that. So all those components goes inside this tag, the application tag. And this application tag has few properties. So the first one is allowing backup. That's nothing but you say that you allow saving data inside your application. And then the other one is icon. Icon is nothing but the icon of the app. So when you install any app on Android phone, you see the icon. So those icons come from here. The label is nothing but the name of the app. The round icon is another type of icon. So some of the phones have round icon instead of square one. So you provide the round icon here. Support RTL is nothing but if your app is supporting reading stuff from left to right and right to left, then you say true to this property. Theme is you define the app theme here using this theme key property. Then you define the activities. Activities are nothing but screen. I'll explain that in the next two slides. Then services, you define services, which we'll also learn later in the next few slides we'll learn services also. So you also have to define it here. So if you want to use these activities and services, you have to define it here. And if you see, this activity is something different than all the other activities, because this is the main activity. So the main activity is the activity which opens the screen, which opens when you click the app icon on your phone. So consider Facebook. So when you click on Facebook icon, it opens like your news screen or something, some screen in which you can see all the feeds. So that screen is your main activity, and in which basically you say there is an intent filter saying that this is the main activity. So you give like this name, Android intent action main, to the name. And then to category, you basically provide saying that this is a launcher category. So basically it means the activity will be launched, this activity will be launched when the app icon is clicked. So if you want to make any activity a launcher activity, you have to specify this intent filter in that activity. You can have only one intent filter with launcher inside one of the activity. You cannot have multiple activities with the same intent filter. So let's learn what are components now. So components are the basic elements of Android app. So there are four type of components: the activities, the services, the broadcast receivers, and content provider. So in this presentation today, we'll learn about the activities and services. You will learn this in next few workshops. So let's see what are activities. So activities are nothing but the screens which you see on your Android app. So if you, for example, if you open Facebook, so the login screen which you see initially is an activity. Then you provide your credentials, you click on the login button, and then it goes to a screen where you see all the feeds. Those are also those that is also another activity. And then you click on your profile or some other about me page, it goes to your profile, that's another activity. So all the screens on the Android app are activities. So what's activity life cycle? So a life cycle of any activity means that how that activity will be created and how that activity will be destroyed and what happens in between as well. So this is the diagram which is given by Android, and this explains what the life cycle of an activity looks like. So activity initially, when you click on an app icon, so if it is a launcher activity, it will go and it will call a callback called on create function will be called, and then a on start function will be called, and then after that on resume is called, and similarly then the activity is running. So at this point of time, when all these functions are called, you are able to access the activity. You can go and click the buttons, or you can go and click or update your credential or something like that in a login activity. So after that, when you say okay, I'm done with this app and I want to close it, so when you close the app, like clicking the black back button or clicking the home button to get it to background, when you do that, what happens is on pause, on stop, and on destroys are called. So these three functions are called depending on what you are doing. Either on destroy will be called or will not be called depending on what function, either you are using back button or your home button or whatever. So these are the life cycles of the activity. There is on restart as well, which happens when you uh, go to background, and then when you start the app again, on restart is called, and then on start is called. We'll learn about the use cases in the next slide. So let's also learn about what each are used for. So on create is nothing but it's the first function which is called when an activity is created. So this is the first method, and it is only called like once in the life cycle of the activity. uh, Also, if you see on destroy, this is opposite to on create. So when on create creates the activity, on destroy destroys the activity, and it is also called once in the life cycle of the activity. So on restart is a function which is called when an activity restarts from on stop. So if the activity was stopped, was in background, so you click the home button, the app went into background, then you click the recent app button, and then you click on the app again, it opens the activity again. That time on restart is called. So on restart is called that time. After that on start is called. So on start is called also the same, like you go background and then you start. After restart, it called start as well. After that, on start on resume is called. So if your activity is partially hidden, or you just click the lock button and lock the phone and then unlock it again, that time on resume is called. And opposite to that, there is on pause. So if you lock your phone or you just partially hide your activity, on pause is called. And on stop is opposite of basically on start. So when the activity is started, and if you press the home button, it goes to back, that time on stop is called. So let's see some use cases. So there are basically three use cases of activity life cycles. So when you open the app and when you click the back button on your phone and the app closes, that time that's one of the use case. Then if you click the home button instead of clicking the back button, that's the second use case. And if some other dialogue or something like that pops up on your activity when you are using the app, that's the third use case. So let's go to the Android Studio. So if you guys are working along with the presentation, then you can just open Android Studio and open the app which we downloaded in the prerequisites. So if you go to the app, this is the folder. And if you go to the main activity, this is the main activity. And there are to-dos. If you want to see all the to-dos, I have written all the to-dos with steps. So you can go to to-do here, and then we'll be using logcat as well a lot to see the logs which will be displayed when we open and close the app. And I've created a tag here. You can create the tag using edit filter configuration. Just go to that and name the tag whatever you want, which you'll use in the code. So I've already created one. Let's go to the first step. So the first step is we want to log when the app is open, and on create function is called. So this is the on create function, and this is the activity. So you, if you want to create an activity, you can just go there, click here, new, and then you can see activity here and click one of the activity. I've created an empty activity, but you can create whichever activity you are using in your app. So once you create the activity, there are a lot of overridden functions. For adding an overridden function, what you can do is you can go to any blank space and then right click on it, go to generate, clicking on generate. After that, click on override methods. And in override methods, this is the parent activity which we are extending here. And you'll see all the overridden functions here, like on start, on stop, everything which we have not yet added. All those functions are here, so you can add it from here. So I've already added those functions. I just need to uncomment them, so I'll do it by step. So this is the on create function. We have this log which we have written here. We use this class log.d to log a debug. We are using some tag. And then what is happening here is when the app is started, when this activity will be started, this function will be called, and then we'll log this thing here in the logcat. So let's go to step 2 and uncomment on restart, as well as uncomment on start here. For uncommenting, I am using command backslash. For Windows, you can use control shift backslash. Let's uncomment on resume. So if you see, what I did is on create, on restart, on start, and on resume. These are the 4 things I have uncommented till now. This all these functions are called when an activity is started. So let's go on comment on pause, on stop, and on destroy as well. So these are the functions. All these 3 functions are called when an activity is destroyed or going back in the background or something like that. So now let's run the app and see what is happening here in the logcat. So here is the app, and you see when the activity started, this is the activity, this is our main activity. When the activity started, we got logs on create, on start, and on resume. So when the activity started, and because we can interact with the activity, we can click anywhere. Because of this, all these 3 functions are called. So on create, on start, and on resume. When on resume is called, that's the time when a user can actually interact with the activity. So now let's click this button to to see what happens. So what I've done is, after click of this button, I have just changed the color of this two buttons, just to understand how we can just to understand the life cycles of the activity. So now these two colors are changed, and when I click this back button, let's see what happens. So when I click this back button, the app is closed. And if you see, we have now three more functions called here: on pause, on stop, and on destroy. So basically what is happening is, when the app is going to the background, on pause is called, and when the app is in the background, on stop is called. And because we have used back button to go to the background, on destroy is as well called, and the activity is destroyed. So now we don't have any instances of this activity available. So let's go to the launcher and let's click the icon of our app again. So now let's see what happens. So when I click this app, it opens, but you see the color are gone. So that means the activity was totally destroyed, and the whole activity is created as a new activity. And if you see, we also got these three functions: on create, on start, and on resume. So now this was the first use case which we studied in the presentation. So where we use the back button to go back. So now let's see what happens when we click the home button. Let's also click the style app. So now the colors are changed. And then let's see, after clicking home button, what happens. So I clicked home button, we went back, but we didn't use the back button. So now when I clicked home button, what happened is, just on pause and on stop is called. There's no on destroy, because the activity is not yet destroyed. It is there. So it is just in the background, it is still alive. So let's go and start the activity again, but this time, instead of starting from uh, the icon, let's start from this thing. So when I start from this thing and I click this, you see the color has not changed. That means the activity was not destroyed, the activity was still there, it was just hidden. The whole activity was hidden. And if we come back and see, only on restart, on start, and on resume is called. There's no on create, because we have learned before that on create is called only once in the activity lifecycle. And in this whole activity, on create was called only when the back button was clicked and the app was opened again, or when the first time we clicked on the app icon to open the app. So on start, restart, and on start was on start and on resume was called. So when we started the activity again from on stop, restart, start, and resume was called. Now let's that was the second use case we studied, and now the third use case is when the activity is partially hidden. So like a dialog comes up or something like that, instead of totally going back in the background. So for doing that, I've created a this thing share button, and when I click this share button, a dialog will come from the bottom. So let's click this share button and also give some spaces here so we can log it properly. So let's click this, and then if you see, only on pause is called. There's no on stop. So on stop is called only when you are not able to access the activity, or when you cannot see the activity. At this point, we can actually see the activity. It's just partially hidden because there's a dialog on top of it. So only on pause is called. There's no on stop. There's no on destroy. So now let's see what happens when we just close this dialog instead of doing anything, right? So let's click outside and the dialog is gone. So now I'm again able to interact with my activity. So now if you see on the logs, on resume is called. So there's no uh, on start or on restart called. There's only on resume. That means when you go into partial hidden state, and then when you come back, there's no on start or on restart. There's only on resume, because you were partially hidden. You were not actually gone into background. So these are the life cycle of the activities, and these functions are used a lot when you are creating any app. Because consider you want to initialize something only once, then use this on create method, and you say, okay, create this view only once. You don't want to create all the views again and again. You just want to create the view once the app is started. So you use this function to create the view. Then you use the on pause function when you want to say, okay, the activity is partially hidden, and I want to uninitialize a few listeners which I'm listening to, or I want to unbind through some service or something which you want to do when activity is partially hidden, you can do it here. uh, Consider your activity went into the background and you open your app like after 10 days. You don't want your app to be running there and using all the memory, right? So in on stop, what you can do is once your activity goes into background, you can just destroy few of the memory objects which you are using. Like if you have something which is getting downloaded and you want the app to just close that down, stop that download when the activity goes into background, you can do it here. So all these lifecycle functions are used like this. So this was the life cycle of activity. Let's go to the next topic. So the next topic is intent. So intents are nothing but you've seen an activity at this point, but you don't know how to actually go from one activity to another activity. So if I click one of the button, how do I go to another activity? So and how do I pass the data from one activity to another activity? Like if you are on the login page and if you want to log in, you have to pass your credentials to the other activity so that it can go and log in, right? So that passing of data is done by intent. So intent is a messaging object. Okay. So and it is used for basically three functions: starting an activity, starting a service is another component we'll see in next few slides, and delivering a broadcasts are nothing but you get notification sometimes on your phone for some of the apps, or you see a notification saying that, oh, the battery is low, something like that. Those are broadcasts given by the app or by the Android system. So intents have a specific structure. So those intents are a class, but it has some variables in it. So those variables are like component name, action name, data category, extra, and flags. So component name is nothing but the name of the activity it is going to. So if you are in your login activity, you give your credential, you click on login, you go to the news feed or main activity. That's the activity which is the component name. So the feeds activity will be the component name. The action name is nothing but you consider you are using an app in which there is a number, phone number, and you click that phone number and you want to open the dialer app. So the action will which you will tell the Android system to do is open dialer app. So that action is defined here in action name. And the data is nothing. When you are doing an action, you also have to give data, right? So when you're clicking the phone number, you want the dialer app to open the activity with the phone number, so you will be passing the phone number as data. The category we just saw in manifest, that categories are used for intent filter. So that category is the same category here. So you define saying, okay, this activity needs to be a launcher activity. So you define the category needs to be a launcher category for that activity. So extras are nothing but very similar to data, but if you want to go from one activity to another activity and you want to pass some extra data, like the credentials, the username and login password, then you pass it in extra. And flags are nothing but some requirements given to the intent or to the component, to the activity, saying that, oh, you will be opening this activity and this will be just the activity which is started on top. So basically this will be the first activity, something like that. It's a requirement for that activity. So let's see what types of intents are there. There are two types of intents. There is an explicit intent and implicit intent. So the explicit intent is nothing but when you have an app and you have multiple screens like Facebook, you have login, feeds, profile, and multiple other screens, right? So when you want to open in your app from one screen to another screen, you use explicit intent. So the way you use it is you create an object with new. So you create an intent object and then you pass few things, few parameters in it. We'll study this in the next slide. Implicit intent, as the name suggests, it is implicit. Basically what it means is you don't know which activity to open, you just know what action to do. So for example, web URLs, right? So you have like Chrome, Microsoft, and Chrome, Firefox and all the other browsers in your phone, and you know that you want to open this URL, but you don't know which browser to use to open this URL. So you implicitly tell the Android system that, okay, I want to open this URL, and this is the action what I want to do on this URL, but I don't know which app to open. So can you show me a chooser or something in which you show me all the app, and the user can actually select which browser to use to open the URL. So something like that. And for doing that, we use this code. So let's see in Android Studio how we use intents. So in the main activity, if you go to step 8, we have this contact app button. So if you go here, there is this button, right? There are these two buttons. So when I click on this button, it should go to, at this point, it is doing nothing, but it should go to another activity, the contact app. So what we have to do is we have to uncomment these two lines. And what these two lines are doing is it is creating a new intent, and this new intent has two parameters in it. The first parameter is the activity in which you are, so the main activity, because you are in the main activity. And then the second parameter is the activity which you want to go to. So because we want to open contacts main activity, we provide contacts main activity here. And then we use start activity. This is a function given by the Android system. So when you extend your class to app compact activity class, you get this function already with you. So you can just use this function like start activity, and then you pass an intent which you just created, sorry, just created here in start activity. Same thing will do for this services also. So we have this thing, we are just creating a intent here, and then we are passing, instead of contact main activity, we are passing service main activity, which will open a service page, which we'll learn later. And then we are also starting activity with same object which we created. And let's run the app and see what happens. So I'm running the app. Just run. So now when I click on contact app, it will open a new activity. So this is the new activity. And if you see, this activity is on top of the other activity. So when I click back button, it goes to the same activity again. So let's click on this and go to this activity. And let's also go to this thing, so we can see all the tags instead of just seeing the main activity logs. So now let's go to contacts main activity and uncomment few stuff here. So if you go to add details function, this is a function which is basically called from this button. So when you click the add details button here, this function is called, and we'll do something in this function which will take us from this activity to another activity. But we'll do something extra here as well. So what we'll do is we'll uncomment this stuff. And now let's see what we are doing here. So what we are doing is we are getting the text. So if you see here, we have enter name. So we'll enter some name here, and then we'll get that name. We'll get that name, and then we'll create an intent, because we want to go from this activity to this activity, add details activity. And then what we want to do is we want to get that name, and also we want to pass that name to that activity. So previously what we were doing is we were just opening, by clicking the button, we were just opening the activity. But in this, what we want to do is we want to pass the data with the activity to the add details activity. And here, instead of using start activity, we'll be using start activity for result. I'll explain this in a few seconds. And we'll be passing the intent as we used to do, but we'll be passing a request code as well. This request code is used for start activity for result. That means this request code is used for this specific activity. And what happens is when we return to this activity back from this add details activity, this request code will be used to determine that, oh, you came from this activity, add details activity. So let's go to add details activity and uncomment this part. So in add details activity, we have this display name. which is doing nothing, but it is displaying the name which we got from the contacts main activity. Like I'm typing Ravin here, so that name will be displayed on this screen. So this is the layout of add details activity, and it has the name and it will be displayed here. So let's uncomment this part. So this part is what it is doing is there's a function called get intent, which you get it from the same app compact activity. So you can use this function, get the intent which is passed from this activity contact main activity. You check whether it's not null. If it is null, you just say okay, we can't do anything. And if it is not null, which it will be, we'll just get the extras which we are passing here. So if you see, we passed an extra, right? We used intent put extra. We learned about extras in intent, right? So we use that put extra function. We pass a key and a value here. So the key can be anything. You can put whatever key you want, but the key needs to be whatever key you use here. You have to use the same key here as well. So at this point, I'm just putting name underscore extra, and then giving a value of Raven, and then I'm using get extra function from intent. So get a string extra, and I'm just getting the keys using the same key name extra and getting the name out of it, and then I'm just setting the text here. So let's go and see how you create contact. So at this point, what we are doing is we are just passing the add details. We're using the name here, clicking here, and then going to the next page where we'll show the name, whatever we are passing from one activity, the contact activity. So now what we'll do is, you see here in this, we have got the name, but now what we want to do is we'll pass the phone number and address, and we'll create the contact and we'll pass it back to the contact's main activity. And that's why we were using start activity for result. So let's see what we have to do for using that, for doing passing the data. So I have created this function. So if you go this button, when you click create contact button, it will basically call that function, this function, create contact function. And what I'm doing is I'm just getting the data, phone and address, and checking whether it is not empty. And if it is not empty, what I'm doing is I'm creating an intent here. So if you see, this is something different from what we were usually doing. We were actually passing few parameters here, like from where you go, and but this intent is not for moving from one activity to another activity, but this is only for passing data. So what we are doing is we are just creating an intent without any parameters in it, and now we are putting some extras in it. So the way we did it before, we are doing it here, but now instead of putting only one, we are putting three. We are putting name, phone, and address. So here we are putting the name, and then we are putting phone and address as well. So after doing that, we have to go to the previous activity. And how do we do that? We set result. So setting the result means you say, okay, this is what I want to transfer from this activity back to the main activity when my current add details activity get destroyed. And how do you destroy that? By calling finish. So finish is another function provided by the app compact activity, which you extend, and you just call finish and it will destroy the current activity, this activity. And because you have set result with okay, it will send the data back to the contact's main activity in this function here. So we'll uncomment the step 13 as well. And what we are doing is, this is a function which you can override the same way which we use to override other functions like on start, on resume. You can just go and right click and go to override and override this function. So on activity result is called when this activity is finished. This function is called with the request code. The request code will be same as the request code we passed here when we start activity for result. And then the result code will be same as the result code which we pass here, that is result okay. And the intent will be the same intent which we passed here, which has our phone name and address. So what we do is we check whether the result code, the request code was same for the add details activity, which we have used here. And then we also check whether the result code was okay, because if you press back button when you are on the add details activity, it will send you a result cancel instead of result okay. And we get the data, we check if it is not null, we get the phone name and address. And what I have done here is, if you see in the contact main activity, at this point you can see only this part, right? The name and then a button. But I have few details which are hidden at this point. So I have few text like name, phone, address, and share button. But at this point they are hidden, so the visibility is gone for them. So what we'll do is, we'll come here, we'll toggle the visibility. I've written a function just to change the visibility from gone to visible. And then we'll set the text to name, phone, and address, whatever we have passed from the add details activity. Let's run this much and then let's see what happens. So I'm running. So this is the main screen which I have. I click on this, I go to this, I say okay, Ravin is what my name will be for the contact. And I say okay, I want to add more details, so I click this. And what happens is, I got the name Ravin here from the previous activity. And now I can give phone number. Let's there's no validation for phone number, so you can give whatever you want. And I'll also give an address. And then what I'll do is, I want to transfer this data to the previous activity from which we came to this activity. So I'll say, okay, create contacts. And what happens is, now it comes to this activity, it gets that data in on activity result, and then it displays the data here, and it also make the share button visible. At this point, if I click on this thing, there's nothing happening. So let's also write code for this thing to see what happens. So if you go to contacts main activity and go to step 14, this is a open dialer function which I've written, which basically is called when you click on this phone number button. So when you click on that phone number, this function will be called. And let's uncomment this part. So what we are doing is, we are getting the phone number from the text which we have. And then we are using an implicit intent, because we don't know which app or which activity to open. We know that I want to open the dialer, but I don't know how to open the dialer. This app doesn't know how to open the dialer, but I know that okay, I can ask Android system to open the dialer for me with the phone number which I'll give. So what I do is, I create an intent, and then I create an intent with an action. And this action is action dial. That's a predefined action. So if you, anytime if you want to see what actions are available, you can just go and say intent dot, and then control space for Mac, and then you can see all the actions here. At this point, we'll use the dial action, and then we have to pass our phone number so that the dialer can actually show the phone number. So as this intent does not take string here in the second parameter, it takes a URI. So we have to create a URI. So what we do is, there is a class called URI. You use the function called parse. You use the tell. So you can tell that okay, this is a telephone number, and then you pass the number here. And then you just go and start activity. So let's also do it for the address, same thing, and for share. So if you go to step 15, let's uncomment this part. Here what we are doing is, we are doing the exactly same thing, but instead of action dial, we are using action view. That means we are asking Android that, oh, show me all the apps which can handle this address. So what it will do is, and if there's only one app, it will just open that one app. And also we pass a geo location. So because we are passing an address, what we say is, the geo lat and long is 00, because we don't know the lat long, but we can always give a query. So q means query, and you just say query equals, and you just pass the address here, and then start an activity. And let's also do something for share button which we have, right? So when we click the share button, what we want to do is we want to open a dialog like we opened for a share button initially. So we want to open a dialog, and we want to send a message to a friend with all my name, phone number, and address. So what we are doing is we are just using the name. We are just using string dot format. This is a function given by string. You can format the string like this, and passing the name, phone number, and the address to that string. So now we have a string with all name, phone number, and address. Now what we do is we create an intent the same way we created without any parameter, and then we call a function called set action. Instead of directly giving action here, we use set action, and we use another action here like the action send. Instead of dial and view, we use send because we want to send a data, we want to share a data, right? So we use action send, and send, and then we want to send some string with this action, right? So we say okay, put extra, but because we can't define our own key, we have to use the key given by Android so that it knows where to get the data from, which keys to use. So what we do is we use this extra text key defined by Android. So we do intent dot extra text key, and then we pass the value of name with phone address. This has our name, phone, and address. And then we say okay, this is a type, the data is of type plain text. And then we call so we use create chooser. So this line, what it is doing is it is telling Android that okay, because there might be multiple apps which can handle this thing, sharing the data. So you show me a chooser like a dialog with all the apps which are available which can handle this name with phone address sharing part. So what we do is intent dot we intent create chooser is another function provided by intent. We use that and we send the intent which we just created, and you can put a title. I have not put any title, but let's put a title as well. Sharing the address. Okay, and then we call start activity with that intent. So now let's run the app and see what happens. We might have to do the whole thing again because it is, we are running the app again, so it will be destroyed the whole data whatever we created. So we'll go to this thing, we'll create Ravin, we'll do the same thing, we'll pass a phone number, and then we'll pass an address. You can pass whatever you want, and then we'll click create contact. So previously when we used to click this thing, nothing was happening. So now when I click this thing, see what it did is it opened the dialer with the phone number, and then now you can just call. Yeah. Let's go to check the address. So I click the dialer phone number, it opened the dialer. Now what I want is when I click this, it should open the maps with the same address. So when I click this, it opened Google Maps, and it takes the address and put it in search bar, and now it is going to that address as well. Oh shit, I clicked backward multiple times. You can put whatever you want, it's just for example. And then let's also see share button. So when I click share button, what I want is I want to share this 3 value to one of my friend through message. So I click this share, and then it opens a dialog because we were using that chooser thing. So it opens a dialog and says okay, you can use all these 5 functions or one of these 5 functions to complete your action. So let's say I want to send a message, so I'll click this message, it will open this thing, I'll say new message. Let's say I want to send the message to this friend, and now if you see, this is the same string which we created here with name, phone, and address. So the name is Ravin, and it also has the data, phone number this, and address is this. So this is how you use basically intents to pass data or to move from one activity to another activity. So at this point I want to stop and ask you guys questions, if ask you guys if you guys have any questions. No questions? Great. I'm hoping everyone is understanding everything. Let me know if I'm going fast or slow. So let's go to another topic, which is thread. So you guys might have already learned thread in your computer science classes or something like that. Threads are nothing but part of execution. So in a program, so if you have an app, the app is running with multiple threads. So the main UI of your for app is using a main thread, so that is handling all your UI rendering and all those part. So when you create a button, the button needs to be shown, so the showing part of the button needs to be handled by some process, and that process has a thread called UI thread, which is handling that part. So threads are nothing, it's used by a lot of programs, and then there are two main ways of creating thread. So the first way is you create your own, you basically, there is a class called thread. You extend that thread class and create your new class called my thread, and then you just create a object of that and then call t.start or thread.start or whatever the variable name is. And then when you call start, when you create this class, you have to also implement a function called run. So when you extend this class, you have to override a run function, and when you call this start function, this run function, whatever you have implemented, will be called. And there is the other way of doing that is you pass a runnable to the thread. So runnable is nothing but a class which people used to define, instead of using thread, they want to use they want to create an object of it, so they use the same thing called runnable. And then the runnable class also has a run method in it. So when you create this object, you have to also implement the run function. So in that implementation, you can have some logic which needs to be done on this thread. And then what you do is you create a thread by using new thread. This is a class from Java. And then you pass the runnable to that thread, saying, okay, when you start the thread, whatever I have in runnable, run that. And then when you do start, it runs that run method of this runnable. We'll learn this in the next slide. So threads are, no, basically they run independently from other threads. So you can have like 10 threads, and 10 threads are running independently. So one can do for loop of 1 to 10, another can do a for loop from 10 to 12. The like all of them will be doing it simultaneously. So you won't see like 1 to 30 from in sync, like sequence, but you might see 1 4 10 to something like this, because all of them are running simultaneously. And in Android, each application will have one UI thread, that's the main thread. It's called UI thread or main thread, and that basically handles everything other than background processing. So consider you want to download a file, or you want to upload a file, or you want to use YouTube, and then close your app but still want to have the YouTube music notification, something like that. Those things needs to be done in some other background thread. You cannot do it in main thread. So there are two types of thread usually used in an Android app: the main thread or the background thread. Background thread can be all the threads, like for downloading something or playing music or something like that. So let's look at an example to understand thread more clearly. So if you go to service app here folder, click on thread activity and go to the step 17. What we'll do is we'll run this app again. We'll see what is the problem which we are facing, and then we'll uncomment few stuff to understand how we can solve the problem using threads. So we have the app already running, right? So let's go to the app which is already running. Let's go back, click this service app icon, the button, go to learning threads. And this is something which I just created for an example. So what we want to do is, when I click this say hi, it should change to hi folks. And then I have another button here called increment. and it has just a counter here. So when I click this button, this will change to 1, 2, 3. It will increment by 1. So what I want is when I click this say hi, it will take, it will do a long operation. So it will not show hi folks in it immediately, but it will take like 6 seconds to show hi folks. But in that time, I should be able to click this increment button also, so that I can increment this 0 by 1. So let's see if we can do it without thread. So when I click say hi, this button is stuck and I cannot click on increment, if you see. And then after a few seconds, it suddenly came with 20 because I clicked 20 times. So what happened here is when I clicked say hi, the long operation which we are doing here. So if you see, we are doing a long operation here, which is called when I click that button, say hi. So a long operation is started. And then this long operation is doing nothing, but it is waiting for 6 seconds. So it is using the current time. It is adding 6,000 milliseconds, which is 6 seconds to it. And then while that current time is less than the future time, which is plus 6 seconds, it is just waiting. It's not doing anything. So what is happening is it is waiting for 6 seconds, and because it is on UI thread, it will hold the UI thread for 6 seconds. So no other operations can be done on UI thread for that 6 seconds. And because of that, we were not able to click this increment button and increment this. The functions were actually happening, but we were not able to see any UI here, the changes in the UI, because the UI thread was blocked by this long running operation. So let's see how we can solve this using thread. So let's go to step 17, uncomment this part, comment this part. So we are using the code with thread. Let's go to this thing and then uncomment the step 18. So step 18 is the whole thing here. Let's uncomment this part. So what we are doing is we are creating a runnable. We just saw we can create threads in two ways. We create a runnable and or you can extend a thread. So at this point, we'll just create a runnable. We create a runnable, and as I said before, you have to implement a function called run in runnable. So this is the function, and we'll implement this. So what we are doing is we are putting long waiting operation, which we were doing that 6 second thing here, and then we'll use this thread, and then we'll pass the runnable in this thread, and we'll start the thread. So what will happen is this thread will start, and because it's a new thread, we are creating a new thread, it will be separate from the UI main thread. So this long running operation will happen in another thread instead of happening on the UI thread. And then let's run and see what happens at this point of time. So now we are running. Let's go to this thing. Let's go to this thing. So when I click say hi, see, I am able to do this. But because we have the long running operation, we have not written the code for actually handling and showing the hi folks thing. So in this long running, after this long running operation is done, we want to also show the hi folks text on the hello text view. So because the text view is a UI element, it can only be operated or it can only be changed on a UI thread. So it cannot be done on the background thread. And this whole thing is running on background because we have created a new thread, right? So what we have to do is we have to use something called handler. Handler is a class provided by Android. It is when you create a handler like this, it is related to a UI thread automatically. And then this handler can be used to send some send some logic to the UI thread saying, okay, can you perform this logic on UI thread? So let's uncomment the step 20. And we use this function called post. So you create the handler, you use the function called post. And what you are doing is you are using this runnable class, you're creating a new runnable object. And then in that runnable object, you are implementing the run method and changing the set text to hi folks. So what is happening is we are using the handler, we and telling the UI thread, okay, I'm done with my 6 second operation. Now, can you show the hi folks on this text view? And because it needs to be shown on the UI thread, you have to use this handler and post it. So let's see, let's run the app again and let's see what happens. So we go to this, we click this. So now when I click this, and I'm able to implement, I am able to increment the number. But after 6 seconds, see, this changed to hi folks. So the operation of that 6 second happened in background. I was able to click this increment and was not stopped by this button because it was running on UI thread. And then when the 6 second operation was done, it uses the handler and sends the operation to UI thread saying, okay, can you change the text view to hi folks? This is called multi-threading. So when you have multiple threads and you want to move from one thread to another thread, you use something like this in Android. So this was everything about thread. Let's go to services. So services are nothing but another component by Android. So Android has multiple components we studied before, right? So services is one of them, and basically services is used for doing background operations. So anything like related to downloading something from web, or downloading or hitting an API and getting some data from there, or doing some background operation like playing music in background, something like that. If you want to do, then you have to use services. And services does not have any visual interfaces, so it does not have any UI. So like activities, you can set a UI, you can show stuff. In services, you cannot do it. And after that, let's see what types of services are there. So there are basically two types of services we'll see today. So there's one intent service, which is nothing but a service which have its own thread. So services are part of process, but they are not thread, they use thread. So services, so intent service extends to a class called service, and then it also has its own worker thread in it. So when you use this intent service class, you don't have to create your own thread. You can just use this intent service and it will do the operation in background always. And it also handles that handling part and everything by itself, so you don't have to worry about multi-threading, sending and posting stuff. So and it auto stops when basically the operation is done. You don't have to go and stop the service. So let's see the life cycle of service. So there are two life cycle of service based on how the service is started. So similar to activity, service are also started using a start service or bind service. So when you use start service, what happens is it calls an onCreate method, then it calls a onStart method, then the service is running, it is doing that long running operation in background. And then when it is done, it doesn't tell anyone that, okay, I'm done, it just destroys. And when you use bind service to start a service, so what you do is you bind your service to a UI element like an activity. So what happens when you call bind service, it goes and create the service, then it binds to another activity, and it tells that activity that, okay, I am starting my work now, and it does that long running operation, whatever it is. And then when it is done, it also sends the data back. Like if you want to send saying, okay, my download is done, you just want to send that data back to your activity, you can do it using this bind activity. And then when it's unbind, like when it is done with its operation, it also tells the activity saying, okay, I'm done with my operation and I'm closing. So after closing, it calls destroy. So some of the examples of services are a music app. So like YouTube Music, you are playing music, and now you want to say use Facebook with playing music in background. So what you do is you just close your YouTube Music app, and when you close the YouTube Music app, what it does is it creates a notification, and then it says, okay, there is a service running in background which is playing music for you, and now you can go and use your Facebook app or whatever app you want. And then something like downloading stuff. So if you have downloaded or uploaded stuff in Google Drive, something like this happens is when you are uploading, you start your upload, but consider the file is like 100 MBs, so it won't be done in like few seconds. So you say, okay, I don't want to wait for it, I just want to go back and do something else. So when you close the app, it creates a notification and it shows like, okay, I'm uploading, I have this many files uploaded and this many left, and then you can use all the other stuff. So this is also another service basically. So let's see in code how we use services. So first we'll see what is intent service, and then we'll see bind service. Let's go to intent service activity, and in this we have step 1. So let's uncomment this part. So what this is doing is similar to intents for activities, we are doing it for service. So we are creating an intent, we are saying, okay, use this activity, and we want to go to a service, right? Because we want to use the service. So we say, okay, this is the service which I want to use. Instead of an activity, you pass a service here. Now you also want to send some data, so use the same way, like extra key, input extra, and whatever value you want to use. And there are different versions of Android, and the things like which Android does changes on different versions. So because from Android version 0, o they have another function called start foreground service. So whenever you use Android version o or higher, you have to use start foreground service instead of using start service. So because we have an emulator which is version o, so we'll be using start foreground service anyways. So let's go to implement this example intent service. So when you go to this service, go to step 22 and uncomment this line. So what this line is doing is, when you do that start service here, start foreground service, this function will be called on create. We saw it in the life cycle. This function is called, and what we want to do is we want to start and so we are basically starting the operation or which we want to do in this service, like long running operation. So for an example here, what I'm doing is I have this long running operation which is just going from 1 to 10, like 0 to 10, and logging like whatever input we are sending. So here we are sending this input, right, hello service, and then also logging the number like 0 1 2 3, and then each log, after each log, it is waiting for 1.5 seconds. Okay, so that we can demonstrate a long running service, something like that. So we use this, and what this service start foreground function needs is an ID. You can put whatever ID you want, it needs to be unique. And you also need to pass a notification object. So I won't be teaching notification of how to create notification here, but this two function can be used to basically create a notification similar to we saw here, right? This notification, similar to this notification, we can create it using this. So we are doing that here. We are just passing a new notification. So let's go to step 23, uncomment this part. So what we are doing is we are logging on handle intent. This function is called when this on create is done, and we want to actually do the operation, long running operation. So what we are doing is we are getting the intent, and then we are getting the extra from the intent, which we are passing from here in the activity. We are passing here intent, right? The extra input, extra hello service. We are getting that part, putting it into a string, and then sending it to long running operation, which will do logging after 1.5 seconds. So also uncomment this destroy, so I can show I can log when the activity is done, the long running operation. This on destroy is called automatically, and this whole thing is happening in background. So you can actually we'll see how it happens, but you can actually go close your app and do whatever other, like you can browse another app or start another app, and this service will still be running till the long running operation is finished. So let's run this application and see what happens. So I've run the application. Let's go to service app. Also, let's clear this so we can see the logs clearly. And then I'll go to intent service. And in intent service, if you see, there's a notification created and it is started saying intent service. And now I can just go back, close the app, and still this notification is here. So that means it is still running. I can browse whatever I want to do, I can do. And now you see, while it was running, it was also logging this hello service 1 2 3 4 5. And then once it is done with 9, because we went from 0 to 10, less than 10. So once it is done with this, it calls this on destroy. So it destroyed the service. And now if you see, the notification is gone. So there's no notification because the service has done its work and it has closed the notification. So this is how intent service works. So let's go to the app again. And let's learn about bind service, bounded service. So for bounded service, go to this example bound service. And then there's this step 25, uncomment this part. So what we are doing here is so there is a class called binder. This binder class is nothing but a class which you have to use for creating a bind service. So you use this binder class because you have to send a iBinder back when onBind function is called. So we saw in the lifecycle that in bind service onCreate is called, and after onCreate onBind is called. And this bind onBind function requires you to return iBinder. And if you see this binder class, this implements iBinder. So you are extending this binder to this local binder class. And what we are doing is you're creating a function here saying get service. So which will be used by your activity, which is binding to this service, which it will be used there to get the service. So what we are doing is get service is just returning the current service object. Let's go to step 26, uncomment this line where we are just creating a variable service binder, and we are creating an object of this local binder class which we just created. And now what we do is we go and uncomment this step, comment the null part, and once this activity is started, what it is going to do is it will go to onCreate. We have not written an onCreate here, it's not needed. Then it goes to onBind, and then it returns the service binder. And this service binder is a class which we created using local binder here. And now what will happen is you go to the example bound service, uncomment this part. So this part is nothing but you are creating the same way you're creating an intent because you want to start that service, example bound service. And then you are, instead of calling start foreground service or start service, you call bind service. And in this bind service, you pass the intent, and then you pass the bound service connection. This bound service connection is used it's used to understand when the service is connected or disconnected. So there are two functions which you need to implement. The first function is on service connected, the other is on service disconnected. And in this, what we are doing is when the service is connected, we get this binder which is coming from the onBind function. So in onBind function, if you see, we are returning this service, and then we get the binder. We get the binder, which is this thing, service binder. We cast it to our local binder because you cannot access the function otherwise. And what you do is you use the binder and get the service which we created a new function, right, called get service. We get the service and we store it in like a variable here on top when the service is connected. And now what we do is we have a function button called what's the time. And when we click this button, we are calling this function. We are using the service to get the time. We are not just getting the time from the activity. We are using the service to get the time. And if the time is not null, we are just displaying the time. If you see, this is the function which we have written in the service. So basically what we want to demonstrate here is we can use a service to do an operation and get the data back to to the activity. That's why it's called bind activity, bind service. Let's run the app and see what happens. So let's go to service app, click this bound service, and then when I click this, the time is returned to me from the service, and you can just click and change the time. So this shows that how you can bind a service to your activity as well. This is the last topic which I wanted to cover. Do you guys have any questions? I know it's a little tough topic to learn, but once you actually give your hands on with this project, or if you, I can give you some examples, it's there in the next slide. If you go and learn about those and work on some of the example, you'll understand more. Okay, if you guys don't have any question, or you can ask me any question related to Android if you have. So from here, what you should do is you should go to all these links, learn about the courses. There are few free courses, few of them are like this one, I think so is a paid one, but all of the others are free courses. You can just go and learn about services, activities, even broadcast receivers from these links. These are the references which I used in my presentation. Thank you.